Hello and welcome to episode 114 of the Chills of Will podcast. Such a pleasure to talk today to Reyna Grande. A little bit about her. She's the author of the best-selling memoir, The Distance Between Us, from 2012, where she writes about her life before and after she arrived in the United States from Mexico as an undocumented child immigrant. The much anticipated sequel, A Dream Called Home, was released in 2018. Her other works include the novels Across 100 Mountains, 2006, and Dancing with Butterflies, which were published, so that was in 2009. They were both published to critical acclaim. The Distance Between Us is also available as a young reader's edition from Simon & Schuster's Children's Division / Aladdin. Her books have been adopted as the common read selection by schools, colleges, and cities across the country. She has 2 forthcoming books due to be published, and we're talking 6 days from today. Today is March 9th as we record, and you will be listening to this after the book is out. A Ballad of Love and Glory. It's a novel set during the Mexican-American War, and an anthology by and about undocumented Americans called Somewhere We Are Human, Authentic Voices on Migration, Survival, and New Beginnings, and that comes out June 7th. Reyna Grande has received an American Book Award, the El Premio Aztlán Literary Award, and the International Latino Book Award. In 2012, she was a finalist for the prestigious National Book Critics Circle Awards. And in 2015, she was honored with the Luis Leal Award for Distinction in Chicano Latino Literature. The Young Readers version of The Distance Between Us received a 2017 Honor Book Award for the Americas Award for Children and Young Adult Literature, and a 2016 Eureka, with an exclamation point, Honor Awards from the California Reading Association and an International Literary Association Children's Book Award 2017. Reyna is a proud member of the Macondo Writers Workshop founded by Sandra Cisneros, where she has also served as faculty. All right, go ahead. You can go ahead and run the interview. I'm out of breath.
That's probably that was a long bio,
right? That's probably only like half of it too, right?
You could stop now.
And I know you to be a very humble person, but you deserve all of that and more.
Oh,
And
thanks.
it's awesome to see you again and to talk to you. How are you? As this book is 6 days away, how are you in this week up leading up to it?
Oh, it's been really busy, really busy lately. I've been juggling the promotion leading up to the publication day. Also, dealing with the other book that's coming out in June, and I am working on both translations of both projects at the same time.
Oh
And
man.
yeah, it's a lot on my plate right now, but in a good way,
Exactly.
I'm just grateful to have these opportunities.
Oh, very cool. Um, anything you'd like to add? Anything that I got wrong on the bio?
No, it's fine.
All right. All right. Now, a lot of your books, including the fictional one we'll talk about with Across 100 Mountains, are obviously either nonfiction or based on, in some ways, your upbringing. You can talk about how. I just
Mhm.
wonder about, how you grew up as far as reading and writing. Talk about growing up in Mexico, kind of when you moved to the States. But more specifically, like, what were you always a curious kid? Were you somebody who would, was knocking down the door of the libraries? What was
Mhm.
your relationship with language, Spanish,
Yeah.
English, all the above?
Well, okay, in Mexico, we were very poor. I mean, dirt poor. So I did not have a lot of access or exposure to books. So then in Mexico, I definitely was not a reader, but I grew up listening to the radio. We didn't have a television, which was a blessing because we had radio. And we used to listen to soap operas on the radio, to like story time on the radio. So I really love listening to stories. And of course, once I immigrated to the United States and came to live in Los Angeles, we had a public library. And that was the first time I ever had access to books. So I started borrowing books from the library because I wanted to learn English, and also because I love stories. So then I started to read books and continue to nurture that love for stories. And pretty soon after that, I wanted to write my own stories too. So I kind of transitioned from just being a reader to now actually also being a writer.
Hmm.
Mhm.
The radio shows, I mean, are we talking like, the sports desk? Are we talking like serial, like soap opera type, all the above, like history?
Yeah, no, no sports. I loved soap operas
Uh-huh.
on the radio. Back in Mexico, we had this soap opera that I love, a radio telenovela, a radio novela, not a tele, a radio novela, and it was called what's it, what's it called? Something about Porfirio Cadena, El Ojo de Vidrio. And I loved it. And I love the special effects too. Like you could
Yeah.
hear the hooves of horses, and you could hear them like um whenever they would use guns, you could hear the gunshot, like things like that.
Mm.
I loved all of that.
Mm. Well, am I correct that your grandma's name is Evil Evila? Evil?
Yeah, my paternal grandmother, her name is
Okay.
Sevilla, which is
Okay.
evil with an A, and she
Okay.
was a pretty mean grandma, so that name fits her very well. And when I wrote about her in The Distance Between Us,
Mm-hmm.
people thought I had made up that
Right.
name,
That's what I was getting at. Yeah.
like Cruella de Vil kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, no, like there's no way I would have ever named my character, my evil character, Evila,
It's too
unless
on
I was writing a fairy tale.
it's too on the nose, right?
Yeah, it is.
Well
But
then,
that was her name.
and then you're Reina Grande. I mean, what a great name.
Thank you.
You were meant to be an actress or a writer or something, right? Somebody famous. I mean, heck
Yeah,
of
definitely not an actress. I'm not that good at acting, but
Oh man.
it's a good writer's name. People
Oh
think
yeah.
it's a pen name.
Right? Well
Mhm.
then Ariana had to come around, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, but actually, I'm glad she came around because
Okay.
I think it's made things easier because before people would always laugh at my name.
Uh
And then when she came around and all of a sudden Grande
uh
is good, it's a nice name.
okay. Yeah.
Nobody laughs at me anymore
That's
when I
right.
say my name. So
That's right. Just show them those books right in back of me here, all the books that you've got, right? I wonder about like listening to those novellas, and one of the main things I was struck by in the Battle of Love and Glory, which we'll talk about later, is part of it's in Mexico City, obviously the capital, a place I've always wanted to go, a place that's everything is big there, right? Big. They got the richest people in the world. They have extreme poverty, beautiful art, everything is just big, big pollution, great
mhm,
food, huge population. But I would assume maybe the radio shows came from there. I
mhm,
kind of just wonder in general about like the radio and kind of like getting you outside of your small town, kind of like,
mhm.
experiencing the world, or am I kind of overthinking it?
Yeah, I really don't know where it came from, but very likely Mexico City. That's where all the telenovelas come from. So
Sure, sure.
yeah.
But I mean, did you feel like, was that like your way of reading? Was that your way of like escaping kind of thing? Not that you needed to escape, but just like, was that your way of like, oh, cool, I'm exploring the world? Or was it just like, oh, it's a cool story?
Well, I mean, I think listening to stories on the radio just it was a nice escape from my own reality, but it also helped me to understand my reality because
Mm,
the radio program would have fairy tales and folk tales,
mm,
fables, all of that. And sometimes I would listen to a story and it would help me make sense of my
sure.
situation,
Okay.
kind of like Hansel and Gretel. I felt so connected to them because I felt abandoned by my father.
Mhm.
And when I listened to that story of these children being abandoned, not being wanted, it like I really connected to that story.
Mm.
Or when I heard about the story of the three little pigs and how the ones who lived in the shack of sticks were the ones that got killed by the wolf, but the one who lived in the brick house was the one who survived.
Mm.
And that really helped me to understand my father and why he immigrated, because he wanted to build us a brick house.
Mm.
And to me, it meant that, oh, my father's trying to protect us,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
that.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah. Well, in one of the interviews you talk about, someone asked you about El Otro Lado, kind of like what that meant to you. And,
Mhm.
people assume that it's automatically the border, United States. And you said that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, that's part of it. But you're also just like, it's like also the other side of the mountain even. And then, I kind of just wonder how that connects to the idea too of your father being in the United States, like you said, working to try to build that house and provide for you. I wonder like what the El Otro Lado, how you would define that especially when you were a kid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't know where it was.
Hmm.
People would always say el otro lado. It's like, el otro lado de qué? Like
Mm.
the other side of what? So I thought maybe they meant the other side of our mountains. I mean, my hometown is surrounded by mountains.
Mm-hmm.
And then as I got a little older, I understood they meant the other side of the border.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, that other side, or the other side of poverty, right?
Mm.
Um, the other side of a better life, or I don't know, like
Sure.
it just started taking on different meanings.
Mm. Yeah.
And then, of course, now that I'm on this side, now the other side has become Mexico and what I left behind
Mm.
and what I lost when I immigrated.
Mm.
So it's kind of complicated.
Sure. Mm. So you moved to the States when you were maybe what, 9 or 10?
Yeah, I was 9.5.
Yeah. And do so what did draw your interest at the time? I know you talked about being in ESL or ELL classes, the nomenclature has changed over the years. And but loving stories, right? Was what were you drawn to? Who were you reading in English or Spanish, especially in those days when you first come to
Mhm.
the United States?
Well, at first I was kind of reading like children's books, picture books, because I couldn't speak English. But once I learned English, I was reading young adult books like Sweet Valley High and Babysitter's Club. Um, and then I read like Stephen King and Agatha Christie.
Oh, okay.
And then I discovered the romance section in my library. So I read it. Every book that had
Ah.
Fabio on, I read it. So I mean, I didn't really have great taste in literature, maybe.
Yeah,
But that's what I found in the young adult section. And then
sure.
as I was starting to explore other sections, but I did not find any books written by Latino writers, and the librarians never handed me those books and said, here.
Mm-hmm.
They were not displayed prominently anywhere.
Hmm.
So I didn't know they existed.
Hmm.
So then it wasn't until I went to college that my English professor started to introduce me to Chicana Latina writers like Sandra Cisneros and Isabel Allende and Julia Alvarez.
Hmm.
So then I started to discover that there was Chicano Latino literature. I just hadn't found it yet.
Hmm. Would you have been able to articulate that at the time when you were 13, 14? Would you have been able to say like, I wish there were more, or just you were so used to like a lack
Mm,
of?
yeah, no, I don't. I could not articulate it, and I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
aware of it. I was. I think what I was aware of that was that I wasn't in the books I was reading.
Hmm.
I'll check out Sweet Valley High and read it, and I felt like an outsider.
Hmm.
looking into the lives of these white middle class American girls.
Sure.
And I knew that I could never be their friend because there was no one like me in those
Hmm.
books.
Hmm.
And so I felt like an outsider looking into these lives. Um, the only time I ever felt connected to stories was VC Andrews.
Oh, okay.
She, like, I read Flowers in the Attic and My Dark Angel and Heaven,
Hmm.
and she wrote a lot about kids who were in really tough circumstances because of the failures of their parents. So I connected to that,
Mm-hmm.
to those parents who were just so terrible at parenting.
Mm.
And so the kids always had to fend for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And also in books like Heaven, she writes about these kids living in poverty and neglect.
Right.
And I connected to that. And then in Flowers in the Attic, she wrote about kids who were trapped in their grandmother's attic and they were not allowed to come out, and they were being poisoned with arsenic that they like sprinkled on their food. And then I thought, well, I lived with an evil grandmother, but she never tried to poison me. So then, like, it kind of made me feel
Sure.
better, like reading their
Okay.
horror, like their horrible childhood, in a way made me feel
Yeah.
a little better, just because nobody ever tried to poison me. So
Nice.
I connected with those books. So I try to
Yeah.
find connections with what I was
Yeah.
reading,
Yeah.
but most of the time I did feel like like I was being left out of literature. And then I felt that, well, maybe as an immigrant, as a Mexican, as a Spanish speaker, maybe my life is just not that interesting, or my experiences are not interesting to write about or read about.
And so sad that you got to be what, 17, 18, 19 before you really
Hmm.
were just, on a you talked about Fabio. I was flying from LA to Sacramento probably 10 years ago. For whatever reason, I had my freshly laundered clothes in my hand. I think I was literally going to whatever, some event right after I landed, and Fabio was at the airport.
Oh, wow.
And so it does exist a photo of me and Fabio, me holding my freshly laundered clothes. Yep. He's a good looking dude. He was probably already in his 50s by then. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so he made those covers. Yeah. Oh man. Um, so you start, you're talking about representation, and obviously it takes so many forms. You were on the panel. What was it? 2 years ago now, 3 years ago, for over American Dirt.
Mm-hmm.
With COVID, time
Oh
time
man,
time
yeah.
means
It feels
nothing.
like a lifetime ago.
Yeah. Was that 2020?
Yeah.
Okay. And you're talking about some of the promotion for your books and all of that. Across 100 mountains, which we'll talk about in a minute. I mean, all of these books are just, they're award winners for a reason. And one of the big things you were talking about, right? You did an opinion piece in the New York Times and all kinds of things, was, Jeanine Cummings got this, what, 7-figure,
Mhm.
um, what's the easy term I'm not remembering right now?
Yeah, advance.
Advanced, thank you. And so, man, Oprah or Apple, I don't know who, they guard that footage very carefully, because you can only see a little bit on like YouTube and stuff. And like Julissa Arce, comes off, and you see her talking to Oprah and be very pointed. My long way of kind of getting at, from the times when you're young and saw no faces, or like you said, they weren't prominently featured. Are there improvements in representation? Are they very small? Is it negligible? Or just back where we were 15, 20,
Hmm.
30 years ago? Do you see representation in so many different forms, and particularly for Latinx?
Yeah,
So I know that's a
I think,
mouthful.
yeah, that is. I mean, I think we have improvements, and then sometimes we kind of go backwards.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's about what's trendy, you
Okay.
know.
Okay.
I know that in the early 90s, there was a big demand all of a sudden for Chicana Latina voices. And that really helped, propel Sandra Cisneros's career, Julia Alvarez, Isabel Allende. It was, it was big. It was important to suddenly have these voices and to highlight the voices of this community, the female voices. And then sometimes we kind of go through periods where, oh, here we go again, being back into obscurity, being ignored, being silenced, being invisible. So right now, I think after what happened with American Dirt, that really helped for publishers, for other industries to see, what has been happening. And there have been some opportunities. I mean, I've seen in this last year, this year, there's been more and more Latino voices being published. So that makes me very excited. I think publishers have tried, maybe not hard enough, but at least have made some small effort to try to include a few more Latino voices in their lists of published titles. So that makes me happy. We still have a long way to go. And, for those of us who have found opportunities, who are being published, there's so many of us who aren't, so we need to continue to advocate for them. We need to continue to put pressure on the industry to provide those opportunities. Yeah.
Is it a matter that you've had so much success and you've got, all the published books now? Has it always been this way for you? But I mean, do you feel like you're not pigeonholed? You're not supposed to be, you're not expected to be everything to everyone. You know what I mean? Like tell the definitive Latina Mexicana story. Do you feel like you're at that point and have been for a while?
I mean, definitely with this new book, with the Ballad of Love and Glory, I am completely departing from what I have done before.
Sure.
Maybe not completely, but like I've taken a big step towards doing something different.
Yeah.
I definitely, I mean, this book, Ballad, is my first foray into historical fiction. It's my first time writing outside of my culture and outside of my gender and outside of my own experiences.
Sure.
And outside of my own era too,
Right,
because I'm
right.
writing about the 1840s, which is a time period I didn't live through. So, I mean, yeah, I completely stepped out of the comfort zone and challenged myself to do something that I never thought I would do, which was to write a story about war and politics. Yeah.
The quoted from one of the articles about you, quote, but she soon found her artistic voice in creative writing classes and her political identity while attending a rally to protest Proposition 209, which abolished California's affirmative action program. From you, that day I suddenly didn't feel alone anymore seeing all those Latino students. I had more confidence in myself. I was more determined than ever to get a college education and really make a difference in my family, my Latino community, and my country. I don't know if that was in your Banana Slug Santa Cruz days or at the community college.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my Banana Slug. You cannot go to UCSC and not be in a protest,
Right.
Yeah. So when I went to UC Santa Cruz, that I went to a protest because of Prop 209. And I had never been to a protest in my life, my first time. And I was lonely because I was at Kresge College. There weren't a lot of Latinos in Kresge. Most of the Latinos were at Oaks. So I didn't really have a community yet. I didn't feel that I belonged. And then there was this protest that I went to, and it was funny because it was my white uh, housemate who dragged me over to this protest, and she said, "You gotta go support your people. You know, they're over there protesting." And I didn't want to go, and because I didn't want to miss class. And she dragged me to the protest, and all of a sudden I see all these brown students, and I thought, oh my God, here they are. And it was so beautiful. They were singing in Spanish. Um, yeah, it was just really beautiful, empowering. And it was a moment where it's like, I had not even been aware of Prop 209. I didn't really know what it was until that point. And then to realize that I could use my voice to fight for something important, and to be part of the community. And then I was inspired by all the students that were, like yelling and getting the crowd all riled up. And yeah, it was just amazing. It was an amazing moment for me.
So cool. I wonder where on the timeline that falls with. Is it Dr. Diana is Savas? Is that you pronounce
No,
it?
this was
Is after
after
she was at the community
PCC.
college. Yeah.
Yeah, when I went to UCSC.
So I just wonder about, like, you talk about finding your voice, through the
Mhm.
protests. Did that like directly lead into like I can put it on paper type of thing? How does that connect to you?
No,
Yeah.
that happened later. Once I started pursuing a career as a published writer, and then when I published my first book, Across 100 Mountains, I started getting emails from people saying, um, your book speaks for me, right? Like I see myself in your book, blah blah blah. And then I thought, oh wow, I didn't know that I could speak for other people through my writing, So it was little by little
Right.
that I started to become aware that writing is a form of activism, that I don't have to be out in the streets protesting and, carrying my signs, that I could be alone in my room writing and I'm still protesting that way. So that's kind of what I've done. I mean, I still go to protest once in a while, but I do tell myself that, you know what, I'm contributing to this fight for justice and equality by me being in my office writing. I am protesting.
No doubt about it.
Mm.
Who are some of the writers of today who do the same for you, who you feel like are really making changes, or really asking those tough questions, who are really, pushing the envelope, so to speak, who in all kinds of genres? Who are some of those writers
Mhm.
who really make a difference? It's kind of cheesy, but
Um, I think, I mean, my usual suspects are my Chicano Latino writers, but a writer that I really admire outside of my community is Viet Thanh Nguyen. No, he's a Vietnamese American writer.
yeah, he's all right. What did
He
he like win the like Nobel Prize or Pulitzer or one of them?
the
Yeah,
Pulitzer.
he's all right. He's all right.
I know. But I really love his work because not only does he write fiction where he's, exploring his the Vietnamese community and how it was impacted by the US, and but he also does a lot of nonfiction. He included me in an anthology that he co-edited,
Oh, cool.
where he invited me to write an essay that he was putting together an anthology about refugees. And then I said, but yet I'm not a refugee. I was an undocumented immigrant. And then he said, you were an economic refugee. So like he helped me to kind of claim that word.
Sure, sure.
Um, and then, so he does like nonfiction, and he does a lot of op-eds and essays that I find really powerful. And he's always advocating for
Yes.
the immigrant community, the refugees, asylum seekers. And I'm in awe of him,
Yes, yes.
because the way he expresses himself is just really powerful and very beautiful.
Him and his son have a children's book together too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Chicken of the Sea. Yeah,
right.
I thought that was so cute.
Yeah, it was. It was. One of the things I seen from him a lot is, I mean, it's so simple and so obvious, but he'll talk about how, we, whoever we is, are often so like into our own country, ethnocentric, whatever. He's like, well, in Vietnam they'll often call it the American War, and it's like, yep, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, I was lucky enough to teach across 100 mountains in my class for maybe 4 or 5 years when we were both in SoCal, and you were so generous to come and visit probably 3 or 4 times. Nothing like it for the students who love the book, who loved Across 100 Mountains. Like you said, so many of them talked about seeing themselves in the book, whether they said it in those literal words or not. And so good. You do so well with the drama and the action. It's just an absolute page turner. And to be able to hear from you, the one who wrote it, and for them to ask questions was just pretty awesome. Funny story. You remember, of course, Sebastian Luna as one of the main characters. And we in my class, we were talking about symbolism and Luna and the moon. And, there's a lot about two sides and everything like that in that book, of course, with Juana. And remind me of Juana's other name.
Adelita?
Adelie, of course. How did I forget that? And I was like, yeah, two sides of the moon and Luna. And one of the students asked you about Luna, and you're just like, nah, I just like the name. we had so many discussions about it being symbolic.
I know. Well, I think that's what's funny, right? With the English teachers always trying to find more meaning in the text.
Yeah.
And then it's disappointing when you hear that, yeah, no.
Nah, it's all good. We had a good laugh about it.
Yeah.
I wonder, I always think of the scorpions. I remember you talking about the scorpions, alacranes, and the idea of the umbilical cord, and this idea of, rooting yourself and burying the umbilical cord. And I don't know that it says it takes place in Guerrero, but it does, right? I just wonder about how much of that was fiction and nonfiction. You don't have to like give me a percentage, but were you helped along by the fact that a lot of it was based on real life, or did you feel like you separated yourself from your real life?
Um, well, I think that's what I liked about my earlier work was that it was based on my own life, right? I mean, Across 100 Mountains, I wanted it to be autobiographical,
Mm-hmm.
but then the story didn't want to be autobiographical.
That darn story, it didn't want to be, huh? Man.
Well, so what I ended up doing is really interesting because so I had, as a child, I always had this fear that my father would never come back for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had always wondered what would my life have been like if my father had not come back for me. So then I wrote this whole novel trying to answer that question and explore that fear.
Right.
So yeah. So then I guess it's the reverse of autobiography, but it's my what if it's
Sure.
And then with Dancing with Butterflies, same thing. A lot of my characters and their situations, I took them out of either my own experiences or my family's experiences. So I didn't have to do a lot of research to write that book. And the research I did was really fun. I went to a lot of dance shows and I talked to a lot of dancers, and it was really fun doing, writing that book. And then of course with the memoirs, and I did finally write about my own experiences. But then with Ballad of Love and Glory, it was so hard to write this damn book. It took me 7 years to write it because there was so much research involved, and I read over 100 books. And I tried, I mean, the book
I'm sorry, you said
is
100?
Yes,
Ooh.
the book is very heavy on the history.
It is.
I tried to do it in a way where it didn't read like a history textbook because it's a novel. So I wanted to like immerse you in the story and the characters.
Yeah.
But I did want it to have a lot of history and to be really deeply grounded in the history, because I didn't want the war to be a mere backdrop to the story, there are other books written like that, and I don't like them.
Mm-hmm.
I really did not like the other titles that I read where you know there's a war happening, but you don't even get to see it or
Right,
understand
right,
it or
right,
anything.
right.
And I feel that this war, the Mexican American War, the US invasion of Mexico, has been forgotten for so long that it would be a disservice if I didn't
Mm-hmm.
make it a central character in the book. So that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of what I ended up doing. But it took a lot of research, and I know that the book is not going to be for everyone because some people are not are gonna feel that it's too much, too dense, too immersive in the history, and especially people who love like quick reads, or more light
Mm-hmm.
reads,
Mm-hmm.
or a romance with Fabio on it. Fabio is not on the cover, so that should tell you something.
John Riley. John Riley's he's John Riley's the ancient, the older version of Fabio. Yeah. Well, yeah, I remember probably one of the last years that you were able to come to school, 2013 or 14. I remember you talking about starting to work on so maybe 2015. You were starting to work on this Irish
Mhm.
story, right? One of the things that's so great about this book, and it really is a really interesting read. So many things to talk about, and I don't want to keep you for hours, but like how, I mean, war is hell, as the expression goes, right? War is there,
Mhm.
there's no romanticizing of the war in this book, as there shouldn't be. And I'm just amazed too. And obviously this is before like modern warfare or whatever you want to call it, but like this idea of like Jimena, the main character, even getting to talk to Winfield Scott,
Mhm.
like a person on one side talking to like the boss, if you will, of the other, so much
Mhm.
like so personal. And like, hey, there's like Santa Ana and Taylor are sending notes back to each other and all this. And you do such a great job. Like you said, you can't make the war a backdrop. It's everything, right?
Mhm.
How did you come up? Where did this idea come from? Not that it's not, I mean, it's it's based on nonfiction, but where did you get the inspiration for this?
Yeah, well, I mean, the inspiration came from learning about the St. Patrick's Battalion because I was just blown away when I heard that there was a battalion of deserters from the US Army who fought for Mexico. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's like, what?
Mm-hmm.
I was so fascinated. So then I researched them and I read about John Riley, about all these Irish deserters, mostly Irish and German deserters, and I started to wonder, like, what what made them do it? What made them do it? What kept them fighting for Mexico? Even though once they realized they were on the fighting side,
Mm-hmm.
why did they keep fighting for Mexico, even though it meant death to many of them?
Mm-hmm.
So I got very fascinated, and that's where it began. I
Yeah.
wanted to explore this more. I read books about the St. Patrick's Battalion, history books, and then there are a few novels written about them too. And they're all called the St. Patrick's Battalion, by the
Okay.
way.
Copyright. Yeah.
I know, it's like there's no other title. So I read about I read about them. I was fascinated by them, and I thought, I wonder if I can tell the story too, and
Mm-hmm.
how would I tell it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm.
And then as I was doing research, I came across that poem by John Greenleaf Whittier,
Uh-huh.
The Angels of Buena Vista, about a Mexican woman named Jimena who's out in the battlefield. And then I became fascinated by this woman, and I thought, oh, what if she's my female protagonist?
Mm.
And she and John Riley meet, and then it's a love story, not just a war story. So that's how all the pieces kind of started coming together.
Right.
Um, and what I really wanted to do was I wanted to remain true to the timeline of the war.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't take any liberties. I planned the novel that it was going to start on March 1846 when Taylor arrives, and it was gonna end, sometime in June of 1848.
Wait, no plot spoilers. Oh wait, this is history. Never mind.
When after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was ratified and Mexico lost half of its territory. So that was my timeline I was working on. So then the challenge was, how do I fit my love story within the timeline of the war events, So I had to pay attention to like when the battles happened, and then figure out what was happening in my own plot line
Sure.
during that time.
Sure.
Yeah, so it took me a while, but I figured it out. And I think John Riley was very easy to write.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I thought I was stepping out of my comfort zone and trying something new, I actually ended up writing an immigrant story again.
Yeah. Right.
John Riley is an immigrant, and maybe now we see Irish Americans as being part of the mainstream and benefiting from white privilege. But in the 1840s, the Irish were not protected by their white skin, and they experienced a lot of discrimination, a lot of ethnic discrimination, and religious discrimination because they were Catholic. So then, as I was writing about John Riley, I started to really explore his experience as an immigrant in the U.S. Army, facing nativism, and seeing how his countrymen were being mistreated and abused. And then that really helped me as an immigrant myself. It helped me to understand him and his motivations and what led to him throwing himself into the Rio Grande and swimming south to join the Mexican ranks.
Yeah. Your Gaelic is pretty good, or Celtic, or what language would that be?
Yeah, Gaelic, Irish Gaelic.
Okay. I wonder about the research for that. I mean, did you travel? You had to have traveled to Ireland, or else you're a pretty good actress, because it's incredible the research, the authenticity of it.
Yeah. Well, I did it in different layers. So I read a lot of 19th century Irish literature.
Okay.
I especially reading about Irish peasants in the 1840s.
Yes.
So then I try to kind of develop an ear for how they spoke and their like the syntax and sentence structure, all those things, expressions that they would use. And I made a list of all those things. And then I contacted the history department at a university in Galway.
Okay.
And I try to get some people to help me. And I said, I have this novel. I would really love to find someone who could read it and fact check for me.
Nice.
And so I was very fortunate because I found this Irish history professor, and he read my novel, and then he helped me to correct some things that I might have gotten wrong. He helped me to add the Irish Gaelic in there.
Cool.
We also talked a lot about how would John Riley see Mexico? What are the comparisons that he would make to Ireland? So yeah, all of those things. And it was kind of funny because I worked so hard on getting my Irish characters right that a friend of mine read my manuscript and she said, "Your Irish sound more Irish than your Mexican sound Mexican."
That's
so then I had to fix that.
Yeah, right. Got to balance it out. That's funny. Well, you talk about how John Riley, as an immigrant, as specifically as an Irish immigrant, would see things, and a great quote from page, maybe the earlier version, 274. Quote: "Conquerors build on the bones of the conquered." Right. So they, of course, come from the the history with the British and Cromwell. And there's all those great connections there with Mexico, which was like you said, it was an invasion by the United States, by Taylor and all of them. I wonder, Santayana said about if we don't, history, we cannot repeat the mistakes of history. Basically, we need to learn from it. Do you see connections to today with immigrants, with the way, with nationalism?
Mhm.
As you were writing it, what kind of maybe connections came up?
Um, well, yeah, I mean, I think as I was reading about how the Irish and Germans and Italians were treated in the US Army, it reminded me of how Latinos are treated nowadays, Latino immigrants and other immigrants. I mean, throughout the history of the United States, different groups have
Mhm.
faced severe discrimination and anti-immigrant sentiments. Um, but I think the Latino immigrant has kind of faced that for a long time
Yeah.
and really hard. So I found connections there. And of course, what's going on right now with Russia and the Ukraine, and we're talking about greedy invaders
Hmm.
and greedy superpowers that are
Mhm.
preying on a weaker nation.
Mhm.
I mean, my novel is about that, right?
Mhm.
It's about an invasion by a country that was very greedy and hungry for power. And in
Manifest
the
destiny.
novel, I mean, you really get to experience what an invasion feels like,
You do.
what it's like to try to survive through an invasion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm so impressed that you're at the battle scenes and the retreats and the strategies, and it's just like, I know that you're not a veteran of war, but it seems like, I mean, it just seems very, I hope,
Maybe
right?
in
Right?
another lifetime I
Right,
was.
right, exactly. Or those dreams that grandma has, you saw it in the dreams or something, but it you pulled it off with great success. Outlander's huge now. I know it's Scotland and not Ireland, and those type of shows. You have an unlimited budget and you're making a movie, let's say. Who plays Jimena? Who plays John Riley?
Oh, yeah, I don't know because I know Liam Neeson once said that he would have loved to have played John Riley, and
Uh-huh.
I could totally see him playing that. But now,
He,
he's
he's too
he's
old,
not.
right?
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
don't want to say it that way, but yeah, like
I said
it's
it. Sorry.
yeah, it's so he couldn't play that anymore. But someone like that,
Colin Farrell, maybe?
yeah, maybe Colin Farrell, although I don't know how tall he is because John Riley's
Uh,
supposed to be
right, right,
six
right, right.
two and
I think
and
yeah,
you know
yeah, yeah.
tall and strong and yeah, I don't know. Um,
Did you have
but
like a? Go ahead. Sorry.
but I do know who
Mm.
I see like playing Santana,
Oh, okay. I think about him now.
Pedro Pascal or Oscar
Oh,
Isaac
nice.
were two of my wish list
Uh,
for
what?
Santa Ana
What?
because
Oh, man.
Santa Ana has a lot of charisma and
Yes.
but he's also like he's so complicated. He's not. I think in other movies and books he's portrayed as this one-dimensional villain,
Mm-hmm.
but in my novel I gave him a lot of complexity
Mm-hmm.
and he's very charismatic. Even though yeah
Yep.
he's one of the villains in my story, but he's very likable and
Mm-hmm.
charismatic. So I could kind of see like Pedro Pascal pulling that off.
Okay.
Um, and then for Maloney is one of my favorite
Oh, what a
characters.
great character.
I see Robert Carlyle, I think is his name, playing Maloney.
Okay. Who were
Yeah.
you picturing in your head when you were drawing, quote unquote, when you're writing the character of Jimena? I mean, I don't. It doesn't have to be an actress, but I mean, who is Jimena to you? How does she exist outside of that poem that started it all?
Yeah. Well, with Jimena, I really wanted to write Jimena because at first when I first conceived the novel, I thought this was just going to be a story about John Riley.
Hmm.
But then at some point I realized no, John Riley cannot carry the novel by himself. as even if he's such an interesting character, even if he did all these things, he can, that's just half the story,
Right.
And I realized that I was missing the Mexican, the Mexican perspective. And that's when I discovered the poem about Jimena.
Yes.
I was so excited because I thought, oh, this is it. Jimena is this woman who is who's gonna allow the reader to really see the devastation of Mexico and what that feels like. And so I was really excited to write her. She was very hard to write though, because I knew nothing about her except that she somehow ends up in a battlefield. So then I had to create all her backstory. I had to create her family story, how she ended up in the Rio Grande region, all of that. And that was really hard for me to do. So then I kind of skipped a lot of her chapters in the beginning of the book. I didn't really start writing a lot about her until the first battle happens. And she's in the hospital tent tending the wounded. That's when I started writing more about her. And then once I got to part 4, I really knew who she was by then. And so then I had to kind of go back to part 1 and fill in those missing chapters.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Santa Anna is such a great, like you said, charismatic character. Doesn't mean he's a great guy, but I mean, who else could be, exiled to Cuba one day and then brought back, to parades and celebration, back, years later and all of that. And like you said, I wonder how he is seen in Mexico today. I wonder how the St. Patrick Battalion is seen in Mexico today.
Oh, well, everybody hates Santana to this day.
Everybody? Todo el mundo.
Oh, yeah, everybody in Mexico. He's like the sellout, the person who sold out the country, because not only did we lose the war, but then, and he was exiled after the war, and then he came back again and became president again. And then he sold some land to the US.
Right.
That's the Gadsden Purchase. And that was when people had enough of him, That was when he went down in history as the one who sold out the country, because I mean, that was adding insult to injury, right? That not only did we lose half of our territory, and now he's selling them another chunk. So that was it. So now he's come down in history as the most hated man in Mexico. And there are nothing's named after him. He doesn't have schools named after him or streets named after, but but the St. Patrick's Battalion, they have always been honored as the heroes of Mexico. And I don't know if they still do it now, but I know that there was a tradition where they would have a parade every year in their honor in September to honor the hangings, right? And they would have a ceremony in the plaza, and there's like a bust of John Riley, and then there's this plaque hanging on the wall with the names of all the San Patricios who died. So those names are the ones that I listed. I don't know if you saw it in the book. I put in memory of, and then I listed. These are all the names of the San Patricios that died. So at the gallows, not the ones who died in battles, but the ones that were hanged. So it's for Mexico, I mean, they're always gonna be remembered as heroes. Whereas in the United States, they were ignored and forgotten and also denied, because the United States denied the existence of the St. Patrick's Battalion for a really long time.
Wow.
So I thought that was really interesting.
Well, yeah, I guess history doesn't exist if you just don't acknowledge it, right? There you go. Well, that's pretty easy to do. Oh man. Well, I wonder how much if it was hard to like avoid moralizing, like John and Jimena are lovers. They both have lost in different ways their spouses, you know, like, oh my gosh, you know, like they are lovers, they're surrendered, they're united by the horrendous grief. I mean, you can see the situations they're in and all that. Like, was it hard to like, I mean, you did a great job, you know, you let the reader determine or whatever, but was it hard not to like moralize, and especially with Catholicism being a big part of the book, you know, like,
Mhm.
you know, marking one or both as wrong for this or that, keeping the objectivity, I guess.
Mhm. I don't know. I mean, I think my characters are very religious,
They are for sure.
and I'm not. I'm more of an atheist, but I know that religion played a part as to why
Mm-hmm.
they were the Irish deserted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so definitely John Riley had to be religious, and then also Jimena was very religious and very spiritual. And
Spiritual,
she was
yes.
very in tune with nature and with
Mm-hmm.
the creator and spirit and
Mm-hmm.
all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of tried to, as I was creating the characters, I wanted to really stay true to how I saw them
Sure.
and how they would behave and why they would do the things they would do and all of that. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I feel really happy with how they turned out.
Yeah. Yeah, I always think
They
that's so.
became real to me.
I was going to ask you about that. Are you still living with them? Like, are they still living with you?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I can't let go of them,
Oh man.
especially now that I'm about to launch the book. I'm gonna be talking
Mm-hmm.
a lot about them, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited about that because I want to hear from readers, to know
Yeah.
like what they think about the book, what do they think
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
characters. I hope that it helps them to learn some history and to understand why the US and Mexico have had such a complicated relationship. I hope
Hmm.
it enlightens them a little bit about the border. The history of the border has always been very painful. Like Gloria Saldúa said, it's una herida abierta, it's that open wound, and to this
Hmm.
day, it
Hmm.
hasn't healed.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it reminds you how, you know, what is that, 100, almost 180 years ago now, but it's not that long ago, really, right?
Mhm.
There's so much debris, if you will, from that. I'll finish by asking you about the, you know, healing is a great theme throughout the book. You know, Jimena's a nurse. Her grandma was like a curandera, you know, passed down her things. And Maloney, I guess, is kind of an amateur nurse, right? An amateur doctor. There's so much about healing, and Jimena and John go through so many horrible things. And, you know, but they heal each other, they heal others in different ways. Jimena wants to heal as like a way of paying it forward. I don't know if that cheapens it,
Mhm.
you know, I don't know. And, you know, just ideas of how to heal yourself, how to heal others. The war scenes, the battle scenes are brutal, not for any sort of, you know, not for a gratuitous way, not in a gratuitous way, but this reminds you that war is hell, war is terrible, you know,
Mhm.
people. And this idea of, you know, a lot, like you make the point, like in Mexico, for example, a lot of times it was the darker skin, the indios, the people of
Mhm.
lower, right, the Irish, you know. And it's always the people making the decisions at the top, like Santa Anna in this book. And a lot of times he doesn't have to take the, you know, he doesn't have to experience what happens because of it, right?
Yeah,
The big shot saying, hey, go do this, and they have to, you know. So
yeah.
it's a long way of
Mhm.
saying too, I wonder, like, did you have to heal, did you you know, did you have to take an hour away and step away? Because I mean, it's got, I mean, you're writing about decapitations and you know, people screaming when they're getting their
Yeah.
leg cut off. And you know, I wonder about the healing for you.
Well, look, the thing is, I wrote a lot of these scenes during a pandemic.
Eek.
And so everything I was feeling, all the anxiety, the
Hmm.
fear, the worry, the stress, seeing my world upended, and not knowing about the future, right? Like seeing, like facing an uncertain future.
Yep.
All of that went into me writing these battle scenes.
Yeah.
So it helped me, like it helped to escape my present reality with COVID
Mm-hmm.
to actually write about these battle scenes.
Yeah.
So in a way, it kind of carried me through,
Mm-hmm.
the darkest time
Mm-hmm.
of this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. I lied. Two real quick questions to end. ¿Cómo se llama el libro en Mexico? You say you're going to translate it. Is it going to be,
Oh yeah,
do you have a title for it?
Corrido de Amor y Gloria.
Okay, cool. Very
Mhm.
cool. Very cool. And
Yeah.
what has been the early feedback about the book?
Well, there's a lot of reviews on Goodreads.
Okay.
Most of them are really great. People are giving me a 4 or 5 stars. Yeah, and the most common thing I hear from people is just how much they learned
Mm-hmm.
reading this book,
Mm-hmm.
and all the things they didn't know, right? And
Yeah.
how it was eye-opening for them
Mm-hmm.
to read about this time period and about this history. So that makes me feel really good, because I mean that's why I wrote it. I've wanted to fill a gap in our history, but also in literature, because there are not enough books written about this time period,
Yeah.
about this war. So I was trying to kind of fill in that gap, and
Mm.
hopefully, yeah, hopefully readers appreciate it, and even more so now with what's going on, with us witnessing another country being invaded.
Yep.
And I hope it resonates more now than ever.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's got something for everyone. It's got the love story. It's got, such great personal stories of all the different people, why they're there, what has happened to them, the context of their lives. It's got the message, if you want it, the message about, how many innocent people are affected by violence and war.
Mhm.
So, congratulations. It's however long it took you, you pulled it off. And I hope it's flying off the shelves, because
Oh, thank you.
it's such a I was going to say fun read, not always fun. There's a lot of joy. There's a lot of joy, and there's the history lesson if you want it, and it's just got some for everyone. So congrats.
Thank you so much.
And I am lucky, privileged, and honored to be able to talk to you about it, and promote a little bit. I'm hoping to come see you next week. You got some events coming up. I know you got a million. Maybe you want to highlight a few.
Yeah, well, I mean, people can go to my website at reynagrande.com for the list of my events.
Okay.
But I do have events coming up in person and also virtual events around the country.
Nice. You gonna be able to go back to SoCal?
Yes. Yeah, I'm
Nice.
going back a few times this year.
Excellent. Excellent. Such a pleasure. And I wish you continued great luck.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for listening to episode 114 with Reyna Grande. You can now subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star review. You can also ask for it by name using Alexa, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music. Let's not give you more money to Bezos, but you can follow me on Instagram, where I'm at Chills at Will Podcast, or on Twitter, where I'm at Chills at Will PO1. You can watch this and other episodes on YouTube. You can watch and subscribe at the Chills at Will Podcast channel. This is a passion project of mine, a DIY operation, and I'd love for your help in promoting what I'm convinced is a unique and spirited look at an often ignored art form. The intro song for the podcast is Wind Down, and the other song played on the episode was Hoops. Both are by Matt Whitehour and through archesaudio.com. Please tune in for episode 115 with Jennifer Fliss. She's a Seattle-based writer with over 200 stories and essays that have appeared in various publications. She's been nominated 4 times for the Pushcart Prize, and her story, Hineni, was selected for inclusion in the Best Small Fictions 2019. This episode will air on March 29th as we talk about her flash fiction collection, The Predatory Animal Ball. For now, thanks again for listening, and I hope that these quarantine days bring you texts and inspiration like Reyna talked about. Bring you texts by writers with mad skills like Reyna Grande, whose work, like A Ballad of Love and Glory, gives you chills at will.